Hello and welcome to the video. This is a track guide of Oschersleben for the M2 CS. This is an all-new car in iRacing, and I think a lot of people are having some frustrations with it. And there's three major things that I want to point out before we get started in this video that I think will help a lot of people. So, one, in this car, it heavily punishes overdriving and using too much traction control on the exits of corners. You really need to be light on the brakes when you're doing trail braking. You have to think about using the gas and the brake pedal as a tool for weight transition rather than as something to accelerate and slow the car. So let's jump into the detailed track guide and let's see if you guys have any questions on that, and hopefully you can learn something from it. Okay, so here we are. We are entering into turn one. So here you are able to use a lot of this green over here. You can't put all four tires over this white line, but you do want to position your car pretty far over here. And what this does is it allows you to open up this corner, get a lot better of a run, and instead of kind of cutting this corner very tight, you want to open it up to get a much better run down the straight. So you're really focused on your exit here. So we'll run through on the chopper cam. Hit that apex, don't jump the curb, roll slowly into the throttle. We can see that in the cockpit camera. We have the telemetry right here, so let's take a look at what we're doing. So braking moderately hard, trail braking lightly, and then slowly rolling into the throttle. And this is something, when I spoke about the three major things that you need to do with this car, a lot of your corner exits on this track are going to look like this, like a very slow roll into the throttle. Overdriving this car punishes you extremely hard, and what typically happens is the traction control just cuts, and then you end up going nowhere. You end up a lot slower down the straights, and oftentimes it just ends up scrubbing so much speed that you'd be better off using a lot less throttle. So it's one thing in this car, as you start to push, it gets a little bit frustrating because your tendency is to use more throttle to go faster, but a lot of times in this car, using less throttle makes you go faster and carry more speed out of the corners. So now we're going into the first real corner of the actual lap, and this road here is a great reference. You typically want to brake a little bit before that, and this is one of the areas where, when I talk about weight transition and weight balance, using your brake, using your throttle as tools to shift the weight where you want them, to not spin the car, to generate the grip, to be able to use more brake to slow the car down quicker. That's what you want to do here, because as you make this left-hander, we're going to want to use a lot of these yellow rumble strips, but you're not going to be able to do that if you're spearing the brakes down too hard and overloading the front tires. So you want to use a very reasonable amount of brakes to load the front tires without slamming into the ABS and creating understeer. And then on the right-hander here, the same goes there. This car utilizes very, very light pressure on the brakes. It's very easy to overload those front tires and get into ABS lock. So that's going to be a key factor to avoid. So let's take a look. We'll do a quick rewind. Now we're flat out, little bit of brake, right around 50%, tap those inside curbs, get the car slowed down. You do want to wash all the way out roughly to that white line, and then again here, maintenance throttle all the way through. I could have used a little bit more runoff there, but this was still a pretty good sector one on entry. Now before we jump in, let's take a look here. So this curb, the beginning of this curb, or realistically where this sign is, that's going to be your braking reference here. And with this corner, again, using the brake to create more front grip helps so much. So when you do your trail brake, you just want to keep that 1, 2, 3% on that trail brake all the way through the middle of the corner. And then on exit, the same thing here. Avoid the traction control cuts, avoid the snaps, avoid the wiggles, and just slowly roll into that. Roll into it, roll into it. So you'll see that as we go through. So boom, a little bit of threshold braking, trail brake, trail brake, trail brake, trail brake, and then roll into that gas. Use all of the road on exit. And then right there, I like to shift a little bit early because the bounce sort of hits rev limiter for you sometimes. This sector here is interesting. Do not run wide to the right. You get a slowdown penalty. So you do want to open this up as much as possible, but going into a race, if you clip any of these barriers, you're going to get a slowdown. Super frustrating. So just be cautious, be aware of that. Now going back to the cockpit, what we really want to do, we want to hit all of these apexes, not wash too wide. This corner is very easy to spin on if you ask for a lot of rotation with trail braking in this first part. But right here, you just want to make sure you sort of drag that brake, hit that apex. This one, I miss it a little bit. I like to hold third in here and then brake a little bit deep. And then again, rolling into that throttle application. Now, this corner to me is one of the most difficult corners on the track. And one of the things that I found after spending 20 minutes trying to set a great lap, I don't like to use this inside curb. I think ultimately it's a little bit faster. It's very inconsistent. The car hops, bucks, and bounces, and then I end up snapping off into that gravel and hitting that wall 80% of the time. And when trying to set a really quick lap, that was the biggest frustration. So what I've noticed is I actually like to hold third gear. A lot of people are going to four, doing some downshifting. For me, I like keeping third, avoiding that inside curb as much as possible, and then just very closely missing this. I also do recommend, you can see there's tire marks through the grass. Use a little bit of that grass. Open this corner up so you can go around it. And the main thing is focusing on a really good exit down that straight and avoiding big snaps of oversteer through this corner. So let's do a little rewind, clean up the telemetry. So right here, you're flat, flat, flat. We're in third gear. We're staying on it. Maintenance throttle, keep the balance. Patience, and then roll into that. Use all of the road. So let's take a look at that. So there's not a huge amount of brake. And the biggest thing for me going through this was realizing that I could be just as quick or within a hundredth or two without using that curb, because every single time I would do a lap, this is where I would throw a great lap away. You know, you're on for a 1:34.2, and then you try to make up a hundredth or two here, and you throw the lap away. So right here, we're going a little bit of a lift off, but right as I'm about to maybe bounce this curb a tiny bit, we're using a very little bit of it. You don't even have to use that much of it. I just don't prefer having the car over here where it jumps and bucks and slams, because it shoots back over to the left far too often. And then I start to roll back onto the throttle. And again, here, you want to be as close to this barrier as possible, because what that's going to do is open it up so you can get this car rotated to turn back right. So right now you can see right as I struck that curb, there was a little bit of a dab on the gas. And this is kind of one of the more advanced tricks that I've learned from some very quick people. If you're ever going to hit a curb, if you give a little bit of a blip on the throttle, it will lift a bit of the weight off the front suspension, making it much less of a clash on that curb. So it helps you take curbs a lot more smoothly. So I highly recommend that. Typically I recommend avoiding that curb, but if you're going to hit it, that's something that I do recommend you do. So getting back into it, we're starting to roll back into that throttle. Little bit of trail brake to get the nose pointed, and then maintenance throttle all the way through, avoiding a huge amount of traction control cut, because one of the biggest issues here is if you get into that corner, you're impatient and you just stomp that gas pedal to the floor, the traction control is going to pull all your power. You're going to have a slower exit. So using less power is key here. Now all the way down the straight, I think you can either hold fourth or go to fifth. I've been liking going to four. And then going through this section here, it's all about smoothness and avoiding those curbs. And again, the biggest thing with this car, look at the maintenance throttle through these corners. You're 50%, 60%, 75%, 80, 90, 95, 100. You're never going from 50% stabbing up to 100. It does not work in this car, and that was the most difficult thing that I had to learn when I was trying to figure this car out. So let's jump back in. Let's break this down, because I want to make sure everybody can see the telemetry clean. We'll kind of pause through it. So right now we're flat, and then I'm getting onto the brake right as you pass that 100 board. If you guys are used to the Miatas, you're probably braking a little bit further down the road, but this section, is actually very similar to how you would take the MX-5. Very similar line, very similar approach of avoiding the curbs, giving up a little bit of time on the first portion of the corner for the second, and having a clean exit because it's a little bit longer of a run. So right here, you're just doing your trail brake. You can hit this curb a little bit, but I tend to try to avoid it to keep the car pretty smooth. So as you can see, I'm using it quite a bit, I guess. But take a look back at the cockpit camera. So as we go through here, you don't want to stomp on the gas and be too far over to the left. So let's jump back to, let's do the blimp camera. Sorry, let's do chopper camera. I'm pretty far over on the left, and as you can see, there's this dark line on the road. This dark line kind of shows where you want to be. Bring the car back over, and then you kind of want to swing back here. Now, for me, one of the biggest mistakes, and this is very similar to the chicane earlier in the lap, if you strike this curb, it's going to throw you way out wide. The car is going to bounce a couple times on exit. You're going to have tons of traction control cut, very slow exit. So you really want to avoid hitting this as much as possible. And this is my best lap, this is pretty much as close as you can get. And what you really want to do is you want to basically get the nose of the car right on that line without running up on the pointy tall part of the curb, because if you do that, it's pretty much game over for a good lap there. If you're going to hit it, I do recommend, again, using a little bit of a stab of that throttle, lift the front end, take that curb, and then you're going to just have a slower exit out of this corner. But again, that would be my recommendation, is to avoid that. And then you want to use all of this road. But you do get 1Xs here if you put a full car over this line. So just be aware, even if the car is right across this curb here, you can't use all this to the gravel. I mean, you can. You'll just take a 1X in the race. You'll throw away your lap for qualifying. Now, going into this corner, I think this is very similar to the MX-5s. You're sort of just kind of trail braking through this whole corner, and then again, very cautious and tentative on the throttle on exit. I don't recommend going to third gear. It gives you a lot of power, leads to more traction control cut through this. So I like to just drag a tiny bit of brake. So we're at maybe 30-35% with a little bit of a trail. And then you can see I'm sort of getting back into the throttle, but not using it all the way. Just cautious right out to the gravel. And then again, we're using as much of the road as possible here in the green. Little trail brake, hold it, and then there you go. So again, you see I hit the curb, use a little bit extra throttle, and then just patience, roll into that, and then flat as soon as I can. So that is a full lap of this track. So Oschersleben in the M2 CS. Hopefully that helps you guys. If you want to take a look at the MX-5 tutorial, if you also want to check that one out, I can put a link to that somewhere on the video as well. I appreciate you guys. Thank you very much. All right, here's a full lap of Oschersleben in the M2 CS. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Feel free to drop a comment below if this helped or if you have any questions. And don't forget to hit the like button as well. Thank you. Enjoy the lap.